Hello and welcome to Really Cool People, a podcast produced by Schweitzer Church. I'm your host, Jason Lanier. This is a place to hear stories of really cool people. The hope is that as you and I listen, we'll be inspired, encouraged, and challenged through moments of serendipity. In a sermon entitled The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis said, "There are no ordinary people. You and I have never talked to a mere mortal." It's my joy over the next few minutes to introduce you to somebody who may seem rather ordinary, especially to themselves, and yet they're a really cool person. Today, we're going to meet Betty Manning. Betty was born and raised in Kansas. She found herself in love with a guy who would join the Navy, and then they would find themselves back in Missouri, making a life together. Betty's story has moments of great laughter. It's got a few moments of sadness, and she speaks about that. She is a salt of the earth kind of person, a kind of a person you want to be in your family, and she'll talk about that. Lean in, take a listen. Here's Betty Manning. Well, today in studio we have Betty Manning, and we are happy to have you, Betty.
Thank you.
You are
Good to be here.
You're a really cool person.
I haven't heard that in a while.
Oh, well, you are.
Thank you.
Let's start with your story.
Well, I was born in Kansas. The family had been farmers, and through the 30s, every crop blew off, and so they gave up the farm and came to town, Salina, Kansas. So I was born there, and they called me the city girl because I didn't know anything about farming. And I was surrounded by Christians of all types. My mother's family and my father's family were both church family, and they happened to be Methodist as well. Mom was raised in a Quaker church until she was 4, and they moved from Oklahoma to Kansas, and there wasn't a Quaker church nearby, so they turned it to be Methodist. But my friends were Lutherans, United Brethren, Catholic, and we talked about our faith as well as the Yankees and the Dodgers. I mean, it was just part of life.
That's a very fresh moment right there to think about the Yankees and the Dodgers, because they just finished the World Series.
That was the big World Series in the 50s. And then my introduction to baseball, because the boys played it at school, but my family didn't play baseball out in a field or anything. So yeah, that was unique that came up again this year.
Yes, it was.
But anyway, we tried to be good kids. We tried and failed from time to time, but it was important to our lives. My daughter told me not very long ago, she said, "You just poured faith into us when we were kids." Mm-hmm. Didn't have a chance to be anything else. We didn't go to church every time the doors were open, but faith was not just for Sundays. It was the way you behaved every day. Mm-hmm. And the fun thing I went through confirmation at the same time one of my friends was going through catechism. And we had a lot of interesting discussions between the Catholic direction and the Methodist direction. And it was all faith in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I'm going to go to when I married Dan. That was a next big step in my life. I fell in love with him. He joined the Navy. We were both raised in Kansas, but he joined the Navy, and we thought we'd get married the next year. And Uncle Sam had different ideas. Sent him to the Philippines for a year and a half. And there were no emails, no he made one phone call in that year and a half. Called me collect, and it was half an hour for $90. And I was making $1 an hour. So I had to call the phone company and see if I could make payments on that $90 phone call. And we felt like we were still moving forward. And letters, we did write letters, but I wrote every day. Dan wrote. I think he would get, really blue sometimes just over there in the Philippines, basically away from everybody that cared about him specifically. So sometimes I didn't hear for a month. And he'll tell you this, I finally wrote him and said, are we moving in the same direction?
Oh.
Is this worth hanging on to? And then he began writing a little more often. And when we saw each other, when he came home, we planned our wedding, and he had a month off, and we hand wrote our invitations and planned our whole wedding, because the Navy never lets you out the day they say they will. So you could make no plans beforehand. And we moved to California, married less than 3 months, and he went back out to sea to the Gulf of Tonkin on the USS Enterprise. Yeah. For 8 months.
That's a pretty significant space to go to, right?
It really is. Yeah. That was Vietnam time, and he was working the flight deck of the Enterprise. And I had worked since I was 13, worked first for a neighbor ironing. She did not like ironing, and it was a combined family, his, hers, and ours. And she would hire me on Saturdays to do her ironing. And if there was still time, I could bake brownies or whatever. She didn't like baking either. And of course, if you work all day, some of those creative things are just more work than fun. So,
yeah.
So that was the beginning. And then I was a soda jerk.
Yeah. And I called you a really cool person. And now you just called yourself a soda jerk.
That was what they called people who made sodas and flipped hamburgers. And I made sundaes and banana splits. I loved it. I had good jobs all my working time. I had good bosses and good people I worked with. But I left that job in a few years and went to retail sales. And then, let's see.
What kind of retail sales? Because there's a lot of retail sales around now.
Retail sales was a ladies' dress shop that had a high-end children's shop with it. And I worked for Pee Wee and Maxine, two sisters who had wanted to make this lady shop, and they were fantastic and fun to work for. Unfortunately, they gave me a pretty good discount on clothing, so I had to be really careful to bring anything home, anything out of there. But then I got a job as a dental assistant, and I did that for a year. And the Salina, Kansas, the air base closed at the end of that year. And the dentist said, I know you're getting married in the next 6 months. You've talked about him day and night. I know that you're going to be leaving. And the girl who used to work for me needs a job. And that when the air base left, the population of the town was halved. So he said, I can't keep both of you. So he let me go, and I got a job as a proofreader on the Salina Journal newspaper. And I loved that job. It was fun too. Really didn't seem like work, although, you just go to work every day and you look forward to getting off, but still good experience, good people. So we got married and went to California, and we got married 6 months later, as we planned to. And I left that newspaper job. And when we got to California, I applied for all those kinds of jobs I had experience with. And they would not hire. They could tell you this in those days. They would not hire a Navy wife. And they finally told me, because I kept going back while he was out to sea. And they said, we've had too many wives quit when their husbands are transferred, and so they just don't mess with it. They couldn't tell you that today, but in those days they could, and they did. So I sold Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door, which is insane.
Why is it insane?
I knew no one in San Diego except me. And I'm out there all day selling vacuum cleaners in strangers' houses in a town I didn't know very much about. And nobody would know if I didn't show up at night back at my apartment. So we did have a buddy from our hometown that called me when he was in port. He would call me every night and make sure I got home safe. But that was only a couple of months that he was in port, that he would call and make sure I got home safe. He was more worried about me than I was. But today I would really be worried about my daughter selling vacuum cleaners door to door. But anyway, then I just worked. Well, Dan came back. He got a job.
Wait, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Are you a pretty good vacuum cleaner salesperson?
I could have been better, but $400 for a vacuum cleaner was outrageous to me.
What
So I
year
would
was
give
this?
them quite a bit back on their old vacuum. So I think I probably made $200 the whole time I worked.
Wait, you gave money back on the vacuum?
You would take in their old vacuum. It was
Yeah.
a way to mess with that $400 cost.
Oh my goodness.
So I would give them a big amount. I just couldn't take $400 from somebody for a vacuum cleaner. I was living on $120 a month. That was my Navy allotment. It paid the rent, and I had $3 left over to buy food for a month.
Wow.
So Dan would send me cash, but when he was in the Gulf of Tonkin, no mail went in or came out. So sometimes it got pretty slim. But anyway, that was an interesting experience.
Yeah. Well, if you decide to go into sales again, let us know. Go into car sales and we'll all line up because I think
yes,
that'll be to our benefit.
Yes, it would
not,
be
not
to
the
your
car
benefit.
dealerships.
Big money.
There you go.
So anyway, then we went to everybody. There were 1,000 guys getting out of the Navy every week, I think it was, maybe every day in San Diego. So jobs were scarce when he got out. And no way was he going to re-up. No way. So he applied at the phone company, and after a month of taking tests and coming back and taking more tests and coming back, they said, if you can find an apartment in LA over the weekend, you can start next Monday morning. So we did. Found an apartment in the Beverly Fairfax area, which was a Jewish neighborhood, which was fascinating. So much to learn about the way they met, the way they ate, the way that, the shops that were available. So anyway, he started at the phone company and found out they were going on strike within the month. And so I needed to get a job, and I worked in a dental lab. And it happened to be right on the road to where he would work. And the phone company was not going to pay for our first child because you had to have the child 10 months after you started. And we had him 9 months after we started.
Gosh.
So we saved my checks as soon as he went back to work, and the strike wasn't very long, less than a month, I think, or at a month. And so we saved my checks, and we paid $500 for our first kid. He was healthy and I was healthy and fortunate. Yeah. That paid the bill off, and we had $30 left because I saved all my checks. And we bought the baby bathtub and a baby seat and maybe some more diapers. I don't remember what, but like
You could do all that for less than $30?
I am cheap. I am a
I think
shopper.
today $30 might get you a pacifier.
Or a package of Huggies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we had this little boy and we just fell in love with him. He was just entertaining and a lot of work as well.
Mhm.
But we stayed there in LA, and Robbie and I we went for walks every day because he had a world of energy.
Did you go back to work?
No, not
Okay.
after I had
Yeah.
him. Not right then. No. And then we moved to Inglewood because I wanted him to be able to dig in the dirt, and all of the apartments where we lived in the Beverly Fairfax area, they had gardeners, but you didn't let the child dig in the dirt. It wasn't a fancy apartment, but that's just the way things were done there. And so we rented a house in Inglewood, and we loved that neighborhood. The LA International Airport was 1 mile north and 1 mile west of our house. So
Oh.
you could hear the jets go over.
Mm-hmm.
And on a rainy week or a cloudy week, every 90 seconds, there was a takeoff or a landing. So, but he could dig in the dirt. And we had a little backyard and he'd play back there. And we had the habit of walking every day. We'd walk probably about 1 mile a day, and that would wear him out enough to take a nap. And then we had our second child, a little girl. And we continued that way, walking and talking and
Mm-hmm.
going to the parks. And we had friends, little kid friends from the block. And so we'd walk to the park or go do something there. And the Bloods and the Crips moved in. And they changed that neighborhood within 1 year.
What year was this?
72 is when Jenny was born, and it was about that time that they moved in. And we were saving money to move somewhere away from LA because the way the neighborhood changed from it was just a nice, clean neighborhood. And I could walk with Rob and Jenny in the stroller, and I felt safe. We would walk and get groceries and put what the stroller would hold and walk home. And it was exercise, but it was a learning. We'd talk. And I remember standing on a sidewalk watching a roly-poly bug, or a sow bug, they're called also, cross the sidewalk. And, a 3-year-old boy, he was pretty interested in that. And so we could take our time, learn things, and look at the flowers and name them. And anyway, we decided that we would move away from the city because with the Bloods and the Crips moving in like that and changing the way everything was, there were muggings and threats and robberies. And even though nothing happened to us, you're living in fear and distrust. So we didn't feel safe. We decided that we would move back to the Midwest, close enough that the grandparents could come and see the kids, but not so close. So Dan's family, his granddad had lived in Branson, and so he was familiar with the Ozarks. And he talked me into coming here, and we have loved it. We have loved it. We moved to Springfield in 1974. And we had a milkman because we went from I don't remember what his wages were in LA, but after he'd been with the phone company a while, they were a decent amount and we could raise the kids. But when we came in 73, there was another recession, and every stop we made to fill that U-Haul with gas on the way back to Missouri, gas went up a dime a gallon.
Wow.
And so when we got here, we had saved $2,000, and we thought that'd be enough to rent a truck, pay first and last month's rent, find a job, But it was a recession. So it took, and we did it. I was raised by poor people. He was raised by people who didn't have a lot of extra money either. So we just hunkered down, and I got a Milk Rouge. The milk company, Highland, would deliver to your house, and it did cost a penny or two a gallon more, but I didn't have to stand in that grocery line and have the kids beg me for every piece of gum and candy all the way to the checkout. So our milkman was from Fairgrove, and he had a friend and he would come by about 7:30 in the morning, which is when Dan would get off work. He was working night shift. It's the first job he could find. It took 3 months to find it, but he was working at Dayco night shift. And so we would have a big breakfast together, like most families have dinner after the dad comes home from work. So the milkman bringing the milks in a couple of days a week, he would see us and visit with us, take a break while we were feeding the kids and eating breakfast. And he had a friend who owned a house in Fairgrove on the square next to the fire station, a 2-story. Actually, it's a Queen Anne style, which is similar to a Victorian, but it's the kind of thing that we would just almost park in front of and drool. Only this had got so run down. There were 17 broken windows and not a single outside door latched.
Sounds like a perfect fixer-upper.
It was. And we were so young and strong that we weren't scared a bit. We scared our families when we took a picture and sent it to them. We just dove in, and everything we did helped it. And Dan had taken shop class in school and had his dad use tools around the house and taught him how to do some things. And we just fixed it up. We just sold it 3 years ago and moved to Springfield because I couldn't climb the stairs anymore, and he couldn't climb up on the roof and fix anything that high up or get through the attic door. The attic door was about 2 feet by 1.5 feet. So, I mean, it was time.
Uh-huh.
And our oldest son lives in Springfield, and he said, all right. Because for one thing, it saved him 45 minutes of driving out to Fairgrove and driving back for 45 minutes, which if he came to help us do something on a Sunday was an hour and a half out of his weekend.
Didn't he want to get up on the ladder and clean out the gutters?
He wasn't very interested in that. He had grown up with it, and he wanted no part of that. He would help.
Yeah.
He would hold the ladder, and he would, if Dan could tell him what he wanted done. In fact, he helped us put in a ceiling fan and kitchen light last week in our new place.
Uh-huh.
But it's one story.
Yeah.
One step to get in, one step to get out. So we can both handle that.
Somebody else I had the privilege of interviewing said that when they were raising their kids, they had a lot of moments when they were working on stuff, like work projects and fixing things up.
Yes.
And now the kids went away and they all have brand new homes because they don't want to do that anymore.
That's right. And our kids have also thanked us because we've been collectors. Of course, we're old enough now that our families have died and we've inherited grandma's rocking chair and grandpa's tools. And we've just added those. We had an 11-room house, and that didn't count the laundry room, the pantry, the front hall, which was 9.5 by 11.5. I mean, it was big enough to hold anything and everything.
Yeah.
So they've really thanked us because they won't have to sort that all out someday.
Sure. So when you were living in Fairgrove, let's go back to that. When you moved up there and you started working on this house, but then you really build a fantastic life up there.
We did. And people in a small town have reputation of not accepting new people.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, someone told me when we moved in, they'll never accept you. They'll accept your kids because they'll go to school here, but they won't have known you when you were growing up. But we lived on the square, on Main Street. Everybody driving up and down could see absolutely everything we were doing and accepted us immediately. We lived next door to a woman who'd lived there since she was married in 1928. And she lived to be 96 years old next to us and was a big part of our family. Behind us was an older couple who just accepted us immediately. In fact, again, Dan was laid off right after we bought the house and I was pregnant with our third child. He was laid off from DACO, that night job. And this darling couple that lived behind us, he was 80. And he said to Dan, I've got some retirement, some social security coming in, and it'll be enough to take care of your family and us. It'll be all right. And what they did was recommend Dan to the local farmers. It was during hay season. It was he hoed thistles. He fixed fence, and he was raised in Kansas as a farm helper. And he knew how to do all that stuff. And again, that helped the community, accepted us because he worked and did a decent day's work, and they felt like they knew us. So they accepted us immediately. And this lady who lived a couple doors down and across the street, she came by one day and she said, what are you doing? And I was trying to saw in under a great big long needle pine tree that had been let go of. Everything under it was brush. And so I was trying to saw it down. I said, Dan won't let me use his carpenter saw to cut these saplings. So I'm using these clippers and I'm trying to make it all work. And she said, stay right there. And she walked home and she came back with a saw. And I can't remember exactly what it was now, but I think it was a carpenter saw. She said, this is a woman's saw. You can cut anything you want with it. And when you're done, put it on that porch over there. I mean, this is a fairy tale. These people were so good to us, accepting us and our kids. And we found the little church there, and we began working in the church and being involved in community things. Dan was on city council and planning and zoning. And I was a scout leader, and I did the coordinating Bible school, and I started a pre-kindergarten story time because the kids, we didn't have preschool in those days. And these moms would come, it was all volunteer. Nobody paid, nobody earned. It was just working together. And these moms that had lived 5 miles out in the country and raised their kids, and they're living in a trailer and they're all by themselves, 5 acres, away from everybody. They would show me so much creativity. You would volunteer for a story time, and you would choose the stories, and you would do a craft, and you would bring the treat. And they would have, one lady dug up her wild daffodils and put them in little paper cups for the Easter story during that time. I mean, just so much. People have so much beauty and creativity in them that doesn't come out at the grocery store. So you don't know about it.
Yeah. Normally when I think about like trying to get to know somebody, it's like at the grocery store. That's where I live.
Well, in Fairgrove, you do.
Okay.
If you go to just get 2 apples to finish filling your pie, pie, you look down and walk real fast, or you'll be a half an hour.
Oh, my stars. So they accepted you.
They accepted us, yes. And our kids.
Yeah.
And us old people, yeah. We weren't old then. We were 30.
Well, you were young, and then you grew old there.
We did. and learned so much from people, from neighbors and acquaintances through the church. And that's something I was going to tell you when I thought about this interview. To me, God puts us in families. The obvious one is the blood family, your parents, your kids. But then you have a church family, which is family. You have a community family. You have a country family. Even a state family can still mean something to me, although I haven't lived there for 60 years. But God puts us in families because in families you forgive, you love, you help.
Sometimes fight too.
You sometimes fight, but then you have to forgive again.
That's right.
And the same thing in our communities, in our churches.
Yeah.
We're just people.
Yeah.
Everywhere we go.
One of the things I know about you and Dan is that you've got an old car.
We do, a 1928 Whippet. It was his first car, and we had our first date in it. He was second owner. We had my girlfriend and his friend from down the street were boyfriend and girlfriend, and they kept saying, "You need to meet Dan." And this was before he went into the Navy. And we would go to the same party, but he would stay upstairs and I'd be downstairs, or he'd be outside and I'd stay inside. And she kept saying, "Did you see Dan?" I said, "No, where was he?" And it was someplace I wasn't. And so we were both driving down the street. They were coming east. We were going west. We stopped the cars in the middle of the street. There was no traffic. It was just a side street. He was driving the Whippet with Mike, and I was in Carrie's Chevy, 55 Chevy. And we just stopped and introduced ourselves. And he said, "Well, the fair's in town. You want to go to the fair tonight? We'll go in the Whippet." So that was our first date.
Did you ride the Ferris wheel?
We did ride the Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
And one of those that spun completely around and he lost all his change at the bottom of it. And he won a lei from a basketball shoot thing for me. And the scrambler. Yeah. We're not big on carnivals today, but that was a fun day.
Yeah. That's awesome. You mentioned that you wrote to him every day when he was off in the Philippines.
Boring letters, because it's just, "I love you, I miss you, I love you, I miss you."
Does he still have them?
No, we went through them together, the ones that we had left. He threw mine when he was on the Enterprise, he threw them into the ocean before they got back to the shore. And I had saved some. I'd saved most of them, and he had saved some. And we found them when we were cleaning out upstairs to get ready to move. We read them all, and we burned them. They were not terrible. They were kind of boring. I wish I had thought then to tell about my work, but I just, at the end of the day, I just thought, "Oh man, I miss him so much." So that's mainly what they were full of. So we thought, about everybody knows I liked him and he liked me. So we just burned them.
So there wasn't any novel coming out of those letters.
No. I don't, I really have thought, I had interesting jobs and interesting friends. I could have written more interesting things, but I didn't.
Well, Dan turned into quite a writer.
Yes, he did. And he loves it.
Yeah.
Still does it.
Do you do much writing?
Every now and then I get inspired and I write something and I stick it somewhere. I don't have a file that I keep them in. I have a book that I have kept several in, like a notebook. And I just, if our kids want to read all of the things we have written, it would take the rest of their lives. And I don't write that much, but when I'm inspired, sometimes I write what I consider some wisdom or some experience.
So like an essay or?
Like an essay.
Probably not poetry. Or do you
Not
write some poetry
at all. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, it would be prose, an essay or a little history, a little family history, or even our family history, just some memories.
Did you read Dan's stuff? Did you edit it?
I've read and proofread everything he's written, and I like his writing. He's good.
Do you like him and you like his
I
writing?
like it. Yes, I like it. Still like
That's a good thing.
He's 80 years old. And I'm 78, and I still really like him.
That's pretty special.
It is, and he's fun. And humor, sense of humor is so valuable as you age, because there are just so many things that you can't do anything about, that are hard or don't quite come out the way you thought they would. Sense of humor can carry you through a lot of pain. And pain is the best teacher. I hate that. I hate it. But I had a pastor tell me that once, and she said, one of my kids wasn't going in the direction I thought they could or would. It wasn't horrible, but I said, I don't know what to do about this. And she said, pain is the best teacher. And she said, I know that's not very comforting, but it's true. And it is.
One of the other things I know about you and Dan is that you helped to start and launch and found a historical society in Fair Grove.
We did, in our dining room.
And then with that came, if it went from a dining room, it went into a whole big weekend that kind of consumes the entirety of the town.
Yes, we used to call it the Fall Festival, and then we changed it to the Ozarks Heritage Reunion, because what we focused on was teaching the young people how the older generations survived, how they lived and how they survived, how they fed themselves, from planting grain to harvesting to grinding it into cornmeal and oatmeal.
Did you have any favorite jobs that you had as a part of that task?
I consider basically I was Dan's backup. Like, somebody had to watch the kids, somebody had to arrange things, and he was still working and doing all this other stuff in the evening or weekends. And we did it as a family on weekends. My kids have all been part of mules plowing and harvesting. Will came home from New York 5 years ago, and they were stacking oats. They had raised oats for the Historical Society for a demonstration, and they were shocking the bundles together. And he just jumped in and did it with them.
Did you ever get to make molasses?
We did. We made sorghum. They plowed the field, the garden in our yard, and they plowed it with the mules, and they cultivated it with the mules. They harvested it with the mules, and then we carried it over to, it was probably, 300 feet over to sorghum press. And Jerry and Dan had worked with Jerry that summer, and they had built a sorghum cooker. And I don't remember where the tray came from, but the tray consists of something about as long as this table and as wide. And there are divisions, metal divisions in it. And then it's on a bit of a slope. And so you move that sorghum back and forth to keep it cooking, cooler part of the fire and the hotter part of the fire, until it's I guess, the right color. We had Fred Sweeney came. He's actually the dad of one of the kids in Rob's class, but someone said Fred knows how to tell if it's done. And so we called him in, and he came. He lived out in the country, and he came in and stayed with us all that day. And the mules were the power source to squeeze the juice out of the sorghum stalks. And we didn't ever do it again. It didn't keep extremely well because I don't think we quite got it done enough. I mean, you do something once every 30 years. It's not going to be the best. You haven't done the improvement. We can improve that.
That's right.
For next year. But it was an experience. And a lot of the things we did were that, just experience.
Since you moved to Springfield, do you still go to Fairgrove? For those,
in fact, we're going tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're having lunch with some friends there, and I'm going to buy a calendar from the Historical Society, which we didn't get done on the Heritage Reunion weekend. So we go probably once every month or two, visit friends and see about things.
Tend to that community that you talked about, that family.
Say that again.
Well, you tend to that community and that family that you talked about.
Yeah, that is a community, and I still pay attention to Fairgrove. If there's something on Facebook, in fact, there were a couple of things today, and I comment on them or pray. There's a young man from Fairgrove who was in a head-on collision. I think it was 8 weeks ago. I've been praying for him. But Fairgrove has been backing him. They've taken up collections. They have sent cards and gone by to see him. He was a very strong Christian, very active. In fact, I think he was on his way home from a church function when he was hit.
You have 3 kids.
We have 3 kids, 3 grandkids, and 2 great-granddaughters.
Wow. What did you really have fun, or what's a fun memory of raising those kids?
Well, they were lively. All of them, strong and lively. And we did a lot of creative endeavors. I kept in my recipe box, I kept a recipe card that I had gone to the library and copied the names of crafts. One winter, we missed 30 days of school in January. It was the winter Jenny would have started kindergarten, and she really, every day when she got up, there was no school today, and she was really aggravated because school is so much fun when you're in kindergarten. Rob was just celebrating with all the other school kids in town. But anyway, we went through those recipe cards that had crafts. We went through them twice, and thank heaven then they got rid of the ice and we could go back to school because I was running short on patience. 30 days of ice. And every time it would warm up enough to melt, then that would be a layer of ice that's a little bit thicker at the bottom. But we did a lot of historical society things. We would just get in the car and take a ride, and we didn't buy Cokes. I would make Kool-Aid or lemonade, and I had homemade cookies always. And we would take cookies and something to drink and just go for a drive out in the country and notice the birds or the weather or whatever. And then we'd get out by a creek and let them just run, play, pick up rocks and throw them in the creek or whatever. We lived like that, just kind of not so much, not taking a lot of money to do things, but just homemade fun.
Mm-hmm. What are your kids doing now that you delight in?
Rob's a bookmobile librarian. When they were little, the bookmobile parked across the street from our house. They couldn't have all the bacon they wanted. When we had bacon, they had to say, how many pieces can I take? But they could have all the books they wanted. If we had shrimp, they had to say, how many pieces can I take? Because otherwise the first person it went to left very few left for anybody else. So they played bookmobile librarian, and they all wanted to be that. But Rob, it just happened. I mean, it's God. But you don't realize it at the time. When you look back on your life and you see all the ways he's been there, moving things around, moving you to the right place, even though you stubbornly refuse to go or you go the wrong way to get there. He's always trying to make your life meaningful, better. And there's pain. There are things that don't seem like they're going right to you. But if I never suffered any pain and I got everything I wanted, God was a genie instead of God. Everybody joined so they could get their way on everything.
Yeah.
God is smarter than that. He's wisdom, absolute wisdom.
So Rob's a book librarian.
He's the book librarian, and Jenny has been art has been her direction, and she has been a teacher in junior high school, and Drury, and at SMS or MSU now.
Yeah.
She always was she got her own degree. She went to College of the Ozarks, and then she went to,
pardon me.
Then she went to, Warrensburg to get her Master of Arts, and to Hays, Kansas to get her Master of Fine Arts. And so she learned to pack art as she worked in their studios and in their museums. And right now, she's working in a big estate sale flea market. It's 28,000 square feet in Branson. And she said, I love this work, and I recognize the things that are for sale because they were in our house and they were in the mill and they were part of our lives. She said, I didn't realize that was the preparation for this job that I was taking.
Wow.
So, and she really loves it. She's easygoing. She's friendly, and she's very good at what she does there.
That's great.
And Will is an actor. He's been in New York City for 22 years. He graduated from College of the Ozarks and then UMKC, got his Master of Theater, and he went to New York with two other guys from UMKC, and they got an apartment in Manhattan in 2002, and they've lived there all this time until about 3 years ago. Both of the other guys got married and left. One went to Texas, and I think the other one lives in New York with his wife and family. But anyway, he's just stayed there, and so the apartment is grandfathered in. So he's paying about what he paid at UMKC, and he can rent out rooms. And so he's working at CBS television. He does backstage work. He works at Lincoln Center. He does backstage work and ushering. And he really likes both of those jobs as well. But he just did his first off-Broadway play, and we just got back Monday from seeing it. And it's a wonderful thing. And they just got word this week that they're taking it to San Francisco in February.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's amazing. It was written by a Polish Jew who lived in Poland during the time the Nazis were coming into power.
Yeah.
And it's sad. There's some really sad things that happen, but they handle it like we're just people. And I mean, the sad things are there, but there's also some humor, the families, 5 Catholic families, 5 Jewish families, all went to school together, lived in the same neighborhood. And as they got past probably the early elementary, that's when the Nazis started applying pressure. And as the pressure hit the Catholics and then the Jews, they turned on each other to save themselves. So it's horrible, but it's also something we need to think about today.
Sure. That's a kind of amazing journey for Will to think about 22 years, and it's just like hitting a stride right now.
You just have to be in the right place at the right time. And he's looked.
Yeah.
When he first got there, he worked as a temp in a bank on Wall Street. And I was very happy with that. And I said, how's your job going? And he said, the only acting I'm getting to do is acting like I like this job. Because it was just numbers, not people, not creative. Numbers, have to be exact. It's not the creative side of life, and that's really what he likes. And he was our baby, and so he was the entertainer in the family, but we all have a warped sense of humor, so dinner table discussions were fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Jenny and Will both imitated people at school or people in town, and not in a mean way, in a really loving way, but you could tell who they were imitating as they were telling a story. It was very entertaining. Mealtime.
What a blessing.
Yes, It has been.
What are you looking forward to?
I like living here. I like just being able to choose what we do. We both love to read, thank heaven. Dan's having eye surgery in about 2 weeks, and the eyelids are coming down until they've cut off about 50% of his vision. So it's like plastic surgery. It is plastic surgery. But, I mean, we just take it one day at a time and do the best we can with every day. We have neighbors that are fun and interesting. Dan was in Vietnam in the war, but we live next to 2 families that are Vietnamese refugees who've come to America. They both have boys that are probably in their 30s that went to school in Springfield. The parents only speak Vietnamese, and so we don't communicate except yes and how are you, and just friendly. But they're great neighbors. We have a lot of other neighbors too, but it's interesting that Dan was in the war and now they are friends, and they are serious friends. They really enjoy Dan, and he was driving that Whippet around the block, I don't know, in the last month, and the son of the family on the corner has bought a house on the next street over so that he can help take care of his parents, and the parents can help take care of their new baby. And the mom and the baby were out in the yard, and Danton was running the Whippet around the block just to keep it limbered up. And he said, "Get in." So they got in and went around the block, and then they came up to our driveway and got out. Usually I go with him, but that day I didn't. And so the wife had been wanting to go for a ride in the Whippet, and she never could. She works, and she was going to school to learn English. She came from Vietnam as well, just 3 years ago or so when they got married. So life is just everywhere. You just have to pay attention.
Yeah. You, today when you came into the studio, you brought a card.
Mm-hmm.
You want to read what the card says on it and then tell me about that card?
I like quotes, good quotes of life that are full of wisdom. And this is by Corrie ten Boom. Every experience God gives us, every person he puts in our lives is the perfect preparation for the future that only he can see. Corrie ten Boom. I have another one by Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, a woman is like a tea bag. She never knows how strong she is until she gets in hot water. See humor through
through truth.
Through truth. Yeah. I love humor.
Yeah.
And truth.
Humor can really highlight the truth.
It can.
And bring it forth. Betty, so you've shared that bit of wisdom. You've also shared a lot of other wisdom along the way in this journey through your life. But I wonder, is there any final word of advice, a final word of wisdom you'd like to share with us?
There are two things that Spence has said in his sermons that I've brought them into my life as part of my life. And one of them is the prayer he gives at the end of every service, where he says in a prayer, God forgive me and lead my life. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what I was saying, that he's leading your life if you pay attention and you talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was when he was talking about marriage, and he said a mentor of his had said that when you're having trouble in your marriage, as he was getting married, maybe I think is when this mentor told him this. He said, if you're having trouble in your marriage, lower your expectations and raise your commitment. And I have told people, sometimes you're just married to the marriage. Shortly, hopefully. But there are times that you're just going so hard in your own direction that you have made this vow in front of your friends and relatives and God. Sometimes you just have to remember that vow.
Mm-hmm.
And stay in there, and you'll find each other again and again.
Beautiful. Betty, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. This has been a real treat and a real joy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Thanks. A big thank you to Betty for sharing her story. In listening to Betty, I hope that you were inspired, encouraged, and challenged, and that you begin to behold the really cool people that are around you each and every day. The Really Cool People podcast is produced by Schweitzer Church, Springfield, Missouri. Taylor Likes is our executive producer and editor, and I'm your host, Jason Leininger. You can help us out by liking, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. Until next time, stay cool. Whoops! Hold on. Wait just a minute. We've got a little announcement to share with you. Coming up on the Really Cool People podcast, we're going to have a live event where we record 3 really cool people. November 22nd. That's a Friday night, 7 o'clock, Schweitzer Church. Put it on your calendar. We'd love to have you join us. Friday night, November 22nd. And we'll look forward to seeing you then. Stay cool.